And we're live with our 142nd episode of Absolute AppSec. I'm Ken Johnson at CK Tricky on Twitter, joined by my nihilistic, cynical, but always lovely co-host, Seth Law at Seth Law on Twitter. Seth, say hi.
Hey, how's it going, man? Like we were just joking about fire. Well, we shouldn't be joking about fires, but just like how everything's going to hell. That's basically it.
The end times.
The end times.
The end times.
End times, you know. Yeah. Anyway,
Seth and I are waiting for the locust to show up, and then we'll see
which is why we're going to talk about static and analyzers, right? You know, static code analyzers, right? Yeah. It's a sign of the times, I guess, right? Yes.
Talking about automated tools, the devil's play.
Yes, exactly. But everyone, welcome back to episode 142. We're excited to be here and to talk. As always, this week we've got Ken and I talking about a couple of different things, static analyzers, right? Automatic static analyzers. We're going to demo Puma Scan here in a little bit. And then we're also going to talk through some of the code review stuff because that's always a topic. And HTTP Request Smuggling, Ken wanted to go over that. As far as the Black Hat course goes, there are still seats available if anyone wants to jump in. There's still some questions on that course, or if you have questions, feel free to reach out to either us or to Black Hat. Yeah, I think that's everything. Ken, you got anything else on your radar right now?
No, that's about it. When the time comes, we'll talk more about the code. Actually, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to just address this because fine. Like, screw it. I'm just going to talk about it. All right. So
GitHub released a product, right?
Yeah, well, and it's like, okay, the security community is now talking about it online, and I feel like I'll be careful, but please I just want to let everyone online know it's not like we are unaware that there is the potential for code to be produced that's less than ideal from that product, right? This is still an early beta product. I just want to reassure the security community that there are people with brains behind the scenes that have been from the very beginning. They're all working together to produce something that comes out, that produces sane as possible code snippets. But I guess why I bring this up is, yes, people have mentioned in our Slack channel a bunch. And like last week, we were like, you had mentioned there were some topics there were some things that we couldn't talk about. This is what we were talking about when he said that. It's because I don't want to go into a ton of detail about it at this moment, but I guess.
So,
what can I say?
Okay, and
it's just
fair,
like,
right? Okay, so I don't work for GitHub, right? Like watching it from
the
outside, it's been entertaining, right? Because it feels like, and to Derek's point, right? Like he's being sarcastic, right? It's supposed to be perfect on the first pass, but like AI systems are only as good as the data that is being pushed into them, right? Like just in general, expecting an AI system to take insecure input from, let's be honest, like most of the code that you're looking at is on GitHub is probably amateur code, or it's students. Like this code that's out there is not like this most professionally written like secure code that exists. And so taking that code and expecting the AI to generate something that's different than the code you're looking at is just the most ridiculous. It's the most entertaining thing about the whole reaction to it, right? Like we've got these Medium posts that people are like, security communities like, oh, look how bad this is. I'm like, yeah, but these are the same people that are going on Stack Overflow, copy and pasting into like, because they're security people. I don't know. We in the industry, we tend to cast aspersions on developers for the code that they write. And then I look at security tool code and I'm like, guys, right? Like it's just like you're just as bad, if not worse. because you're so concentrated on these few security issues that are your pet security issues that you forget about things like availability, about stability, about the other stuff that most of the developers are dealing with. So sorry, I went on a rant. You were going to say something else.
No, I'm glad you did, because like it let me calm down, because I've been getting so freaking. So first of all, I've been tweeted and DM'd and all of this about this, like
it's all your fault, right, Ken?
One was useful actually. One of the tweets was yeah, I know, right? Like it's like my personal fault that Anyways, so like I got one tweet was actually useful. It was very legitimate. It was like one of the code snippets that we have for our site had some, it wasn't huge weaknesses or anything like that, but it like pointed to a URL that's no longer valid. So I passed that actually along to our teams. So that was a good call out. And I think I thanked the person. But most of the time it's seriously been just like people assuming that nobody like as if we're just clueless about it. Like, and I'm just as if like no one was like, this is a possibility. AI generated code based off of GitHub data. Yeah, like there are more concerns than just that too. So, but anyways, like it's just been funny. So and that's the thing is I keep getting also questions about like betaing it and all that stuff, and I'm like, look, this is a product in development. It's supposed to be a way to make it more efficient to write code, obviously between code spaces being the visual or VS Code in the browser, but through GitHub, and then making that a seamless experience with, being able to just open a repository and have the app running immediately, which is actually something you can do.
Yeah.
And then, of course, having that autocomplete feature, all of this stuff is kind of driving towards making it easier to develop code. But is it perfect? Yeah, absolutely not. These are concerns we were already aware of, we're already working towards. So it's just like, I don't need any more fucking DMs is all I'm saying. Stop DMing me about Copilot and your like take on it. No offense, everybody. I know it's in good spirits, mostly probably in good spirits. I've seen some that didn't seem at all like they were coming from a good place, but just know that yes, there are people dedicated to looking into this and not just looking into it, but like there has been I've been part of the process since we very first heard about like this even being a possibility of something being developed. So I can tell you that all throughout the roadmap, there has been plenty of points where many concerns are being raised. There's many different avenues on how to tackle that. It's complex, as you can imagine. We're talking about AI, right? And producing code and also doing, and, beyond just the secure code aspect, there's other things like, I think everyone remembers Microsoft having written a bot that was on Twitter for a day that said some pretty heinous shit.
Turned out to be less than PC. Yes.
It went from, I don't even want to. Yeah, it was bad. So we're all aware of the concerns there. That's not like it's completely unknown. But anyways, I think that in a lot of cases, it comes from like totally a good place. And in other cases, not so much. But either way, yeah, that's all I wanted to say. That's all I really can say. I can't say all of the things that have gone on behind the scenes to, make this better, long-term, a better outcome.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, there's been some interesting comments in Slack, right, on it as far as training up to see what is bad, right, as well. Like, there's a lot of good learning that's going on, both from like the AI perspective and from the people perspective on how to train things up. And I feel like half of what we do when we're looking at code, like looking at bad examples of code, Ken, is we're training our own like intelligence as to, this is bad. This feels bad, right? Like, I mean, how often do we say that in the course that, to trust your gut? And that's basically what we're trying to teach the AI to do here is, trust your gut, but we're giving you all bad examples to trust your gut. So what is it going to do? It's going to spit out bad examples, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so I don't know. The kind of system that you're developing is going to be pretty sweet when it's completed, right? and expecting it to be perfect right out of the gate. I mean, it hasn't been released GA, and so that's why all the hot takes were so entertaining to me on the outside. It's just, I was like, ooh, I'm glad I'm not dealing with that, because I know the sort of crap you're going to be getting for it. And I've seen a lot of it on Twitter. Like, it hasn't been all just like,
yeah. So have I. Don't get me wrong. And we're not even because I'm paying attention to Twitter, because people are sending me links to this stuff. So just like, to be fair, flip side of the coin, when here's the good part of that, though. There is a good part to that. When the security community lambasts a product for not doing something right, and leadership cares and watches and people pay attention, it does raise the awareness of, like, because, here's the thing. It's the same thing as with security research. Like, defenders can say all day long that you should do this, you should do that. And like, that sounds vaguely okay. Good suggestions, great, whatever. But when someone shows you that, like, oh, hey, they told you to do this, you didn't do that. And I'm not saying that's the case with this product. I'm just saying in general. I'm speaking in general terms. The positive thing is somebody saying from the outside, whoa, well, actually, I can exploit this, or actually, that is like a concern because of X, Y, Z. And you have multiple voices all kind of echoing the same sentiment, whether that's internal and external. That's a good thing. So there's a positive to that. Of course, this is raising, I think, even more awareness maybe, but we still had plenty of awareness internally, and so it's not like this is unknown. So anyways, it's just been, one of those things that's just, I don't know, man. Like we'll see. There's other stuff coming, and people think this is a thing. Like, there's going to be other stuff coming down I can't speak to any of it, right? But there's stuff coming that it'll get, there'll be more. There'll be more.
There'll be more.
That's I'll say. There'll be more. There are more things coming out in the next year or two. So,
well, and I mean, it's all good from I'm sorry you're having to deal with it, but it is entertaining from a dumpster fire perspective, right? That everybody jumps on it. Yeah, I
like it to some degree in the sense that at least people care about the product. Like, that's the thing. It's like, if you're, no one gives a shit about some site that has 3 people that use it, right? But if you're, I guess what I'm saying is, if people are criticizing, you're also doing well as like being a platform to a degree, right? I'm speaking again in broad strokes here, but it means that people are using your product, they care, they're passionate about it. So I'm happy in that regard. But yeah, I don't need any more DMs. That's all I'm saying. I'm good. Please, fine.
Oh, it's good. They're coming. They're coming. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. Well, the best one is when I get tagged with like at GitHub and stuff. I'm like,
you and at GitHub.
Yeah. Like, I'm like, I am nobody, dude. Yeah. But this is GitHub. Anyways, this is funny. It's just funny. Yeah. Whatever. So, what are we talking about? You're gonna go walk through Puma Scan. Not Puma Scam.
Puma Scam. It's not. Sorry, Eric. Sorry, Eric.
Sorry.
Yeah. And actually, before we did that, I wanted to talk about static analyzers, or automated static analyzers, and kind of where they fit in the secure code review process. Because as much as we bag on them, right, I still have a tendency to use them for certain aspects of code review, right? The one thing that I found over time is that I don't use the tools that generate tens of thousands of false positives. And that's, I mean, I think that's partially personal preference, but over the years, I've learned that having false positives is almost as bad as having false negatives when it comes to these automated tools. From a developer and security professional perspective, it ends up wasting our time because I'm weeding out tons and tons of false positives rather than spending time dealing with real security issues in the applications. And so the tools that I tend to focus on are those that give me actionable data and don't give me like the signal to noise ratio for real vulnerabilities to false positives or false negatives is now I can't even figure out the sentence, but is high, right? Like my signal ratio is high so that I have something that I can actually work on. And there's a couple of these new static analyzers that have come out over the last couple of years that help in that process, right? So number one, we've had Clint on a couple of times, semgrep, right? Just the ability to, distill down the code to small snippets and doing almost just a regular expression with some code awareness has been super helpful to identify security issues. The other one, and semgrep does not support .NET, right? So the other one that I've been using lately a lot has been Puma Scan. I've looked at a lot of .NET and .NET Core lately, and it's been super useful. So I wanted to show that really quick, and we'll get Eric on again soon. I know they've got updates and other things, but let me pull up. I loaded up. Yeah. What?
Just going back to what you said real quick about creating a lot of unnecessary noise. When you all were talking in Slack a couple days ago about the Smart Bear recommendation to do 400 lines of code at a time, or an hour, 400 lines of code an hour. One of the folks had said, sorry, I'm trying to go back up to figure out their name, but somebody had mentioned basically that the trick is to find out what 400 lines of code to basically review. And I think that's a good that's a true sentiment, and kind of true with the scanner. You have limited amount of time to do what you've got to do. And if the scanner's redirecting your attention down rabbit holes that don't make any sense, you've completely wasted that target, that 400 lines of code an hour. I think it was Cole. Hold on. Sorry, I'm coming up. I can't remember. I have to keep going through this Slack channel to figure it out. I want to give him credit, but that was it was a smart and true statement, I feel like, is all I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Yep. So the code base that I pulled down, I just went into awesome .NET Core projects or awesome .NET projects or whatever and pulled down this mini blog. This is one that we've used in the Secure Code Review course. And you can see my screen here?
It was Duncan, and yes, I can see it.
Okay. So I pulled down this mini blog. I've also got NOP Commerce, and we can look at that one if we want to as well. But the first thing I do is a restore. And one of the things I was excited about is the fact that Puma Scan also has a VS Code plugin as opposed to just a Visual Studio plugin, right? So I've been able to scan more things even on Mac OS as opposed to having to fire up VS Code in Windows, right? It's made things a lot easier. And you'll notice if you open up the command prompt, right? There's a Puma Scan start scan. It's just one of the extensions that you can install. You can activate a license. You can get a trial license fairly easily from Puma Scan, and they'll give you, I think, 15 or 30 days to play around with it and see how it actually acts. But starting the scan, super simple, right? It does the analysis in the background. There's also plugins for this for CI/CD pipelines. But the thing that I like about it, right, and this will just take another 30 seconds or so, is the fact that the output is very succinct. It's the same sort of stuff that we look for. So it all pops up in problems just in normal output. And you'll notice here that some of these are going to be false positives. Some are going to be, valid issues. There might be some false negatives, right? But we know that. And where this fits in the secure code review pipeline is this is not the only thing that I'm doing, but it's giving me hints about what's going on. So the first thing is constants.cs. It looks like there's a password variable that's being used. Obviously, that's not a sensitive secret. In this case, it's just part of the model that's being used. All right, we can ignore that one. That's a false positive, right? But as we jump into the controllers that are there, we always talk about identifying controllers, identifying different decorators that are doing authorization functions. And this is pulling those things out for me, right? I didn't have to go through and figure out that they're using this authorized tag for, let me see if I can find one here. Yeah. So this authorized tag as a decorator for functions that they want to protect. it's already figured that out. It knows that they should exist. It knows that these routes are there, and anybody can execute this function because the authorization attribute doesn't exist. And then it's also missing anti-forgery tokens as well. So there's different issues that are popping up from Puma Scan. I probably would have found this in a normal code review as I'm looking at the different controller files that exist and are out there. But it also gives me indicators of things that I should be looking for in other controllers as well. And so I'm finding that I'm using these, like Puma Scan, when I'm looking at .NET applications, I'm using that sooner in my code review pipeline than I do some of those other tools that give me a ton of false positives, where I'm just kind of doing a validation after the fact. I'm using this as one of the indicators of, hey, it shows me where the routes are. It shows me what sort of decorators are being used. It's informing my code review, which is awesome, right? We could
one of the things we.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because that's just to give people a complete picture of the end-to-end review. Typically, when we talk about static analysis tools, that's at the end of the process, right? You've already done all the things that help you know how this application behaves, and one of those things early on in the process, in the mapping part of our process, is to not only identify what are the key authorization filters, but where are they applied and where are they not applied. So you do a negative search to see if, like Seth was saying, if an authorization filter, say like you've got an administrative controller, everything in there should require administrative permissions. Maybe another controller inherits from that admin controller, fails to apply a filter or does an exception and says this filter doesn't have to be on these routes mistakenly. Whatever the case may be, when those are missing, that's something we want to identify pretty early in the process, which is interesting that this tool does that. And then I can see why that would then fit earlier on into the process and not at the end of a review, because you're getting that mapping and that negative search result right there. And same thing with, like you talked about the CSRF token. It's just another authorization filter.
Yep. And this one looks to be completely valid, right? Like you're posting to a comment, you're creating a comment, but this person is not logged into this blog, right? So this is one that I actually question. Hey, this is probably something that you want to take care of from a mini blog perspective. Some of the others are just lookups, right? For get request for the categories or the actual. Okay, those probably should be anonymous, right? Account controllers, we could jump in there as well. Okay, a login, right? That's probably okay. But some of the other things, right? Log out. Oh, it looks like those are the only functions in there. So never mind, right? But right. I don't want to get too deep into that. But I did want to show how easy it was to use something like Puma Scan to help in that process. So good job to Eric on getting that out. It's actually all pretty valid when you start looking at it, like the redirects that are in there as well. They're getting some encoded link that may or may not be controllable, right? But it does look like a redirect location that's coming from the user here as well, like models.post. So,
for all we know, that could be base 64 for like, normalization of the data. Sometimes there's weird data that gets in the URL, so people just solve that by doing the base 64 encoding to keep it all uniform, and so that the routing mechanisms that receive requests don't hiccup and throw a fit.
Yeah. Yep. But we'd have to jump into what get encoded link actually was, right? It looks like it's under models post, and that's more than we want to do today. But
speak for yourself. No, I'm kidding. I'm just a manager now. I don't get to review as much code.
Anyway, go check out Puma Scan. If you have more interest in it, we can connect you with Eric. We can have him back on the podcast as well. It's very interesting talking to him as he's kind of created this small utility that is super useful. So if you're doing .NET code, you should be looking at it. So, anyway, that's my plug for Puma Scan. We'll stop sharing there for now. We can jump into other topics now, unless you had questions on Puma Scan, Ken.
No, just wanted to reiterate that invite link for the Discord because Derek reminded me actually, not purposefully. He just happened to remind me it reminded me to say this because I was talking to Derek, also side channel chat. My Slack is seriously running really slow. I think it's this camera. I don't know why, but my Slack instance goes nuts, or my Slack app when I'm running this 4K camera. So if you have that link, Seth, you can because I literally I'm having the hardest time just scrolling back into chat. So this is just a nightmare. I don't know what's going on. But anyway, so just because that's this Discord, Seth will find the link, or Derek can post it again. But basically, it allows you to. We talked about last podcast. This is a feed in Discord of all kinds of different news sources for security. And I was going through it this morning just because I was interested, and it was super. And I think maybe the request smuggling might have come from there. I don't know. Maybe. Yeah. I don't know. But anyways, I was just going through it because I was really just curious, and it was really awesome. So it's good feed. It's a good set of feeds that they're pulling from.
Yep. Derek's done a good job on it. I know it's just kind of a pet project for him. But I'd very much like to see it continue, right? In some form or another, Derek, right? It's been super useful and interesting to me because we always talk about how Twitter used to be more research-based from an application security perspective. And I don't see quite as much of that on Twitter as I used to, right? 5 years ago or even 10 years ago, there was a lot more kind of security research and interesting topics popping up. And it's gotten a lot worse. I don't know how else to say it, right? It's become more drama-based and other things. So finding good sources of research and data in the space has become more difficult. So Get Informed is great for that. We always plug TLDRSec from Clint as well. There's a number of different newsletters like that are great. So,
yep, sweet,
cool.
I need a GPU farm for Slack. You're right. I don't know why Slack has such issues when I don't know. It's sure it's something to do with Chrome rendering and whole stream of input coming from the camera, but it has just been wild to try and use Slack and stream. And it's really only once we start going live on StreamYard that it becomes a massive issue. So I don't know. Anyways, so real quick, I had seen this tool pop up. That's why I was oh, maybe this was from Discord. It could have been from somewhere else. I really don't remember. I draw from a bunch of feeds. So anyways, this tool, there is Smuggler for Smuggler or
Burp. Yep.
Yeah,
yep.
Burp plugin. This is a different tool to test for weaknesses on request smuggling. And I figured since it's been a couple years, maybe we just real briefly cover what request smuggling is. But yeah, anyways, I saw this tool and I was oh, cool. It kind of just reminded me that, this attack.
Request smuggling is a thing.
Yeah, it literally just reminded me.
Everyone needs to remember Ken is a manager now, so we got to give him a little bit of leeway. And yeah,
yeah, I do. Coffee and spreadsheets, bro. That's what I'm all about now.
Coffee meetings and spreadsheets. That's right.
Oh my God. Yeah. Well, just real quick, we were talking about this morning. It's kind of funny. We went to for the next month, I think we're doing this every Friday off, so we only work Monday through Thursday. And but what that's meant, or at least in the first week that I'm seeing, is just a ton of meetings get slid into the other 4 days. So I was looking at my calendar today. I'm I don't know how I'm gonna get anything done in terms of hands on keyboard done. Anyways, that's just an interesting byproduct. The first week of experimenting with the 4-day work week. So,
nice.
Anyways, cool. So, I guess I don't know how to do this. I guess just share my screen. First of all, here's the article link that I'm going to look at here, just to put I would say the boss. I'd say a low-level manager.
He is a cog in the machine.
I am a cog
in the machine.
I try to tell everybody I'm a nobody. All right. So
And this one was on PortSwigger's, top 10 for I think 2019, right?
Yeah, and
I'm
it's just
pretty sure that's what
interesting.
it is. It's a really interesting attack, right? And in the article, they even mention that it first popped up in 2005, right? Watchfire way back in the day, and then was ignored for a long time. So James kind of brought it back with some of the research he did, some of the tools that he implemented in Burp Suite, but then also 2019, right? DEF CON 27 is when he talked about it. So yeah. Why don't you go ahead and explain what it is, and we can dig into it from there.
Yeah, I'm trying to share my screen here. If I can figure out how to use computers. Okay, so you should see. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So just real quick, like I did want to cover because this attack does hinge on two headers. Well, they're super important. I just want to like show what those are. So content length is the first one. And the second is transfer encoding, chunked, right? Chunked is the directive that matters there. So first off, content length, I think we all know on this podcast, and everybody listening knows content length is just a directive saying like, hey, I'm going to send a message and the message is going to have this specific length, right? They show a post request here and they have like the 0, I guess, as the body of the post request. And they've got a length of 6. So that's the content length, right? That the application expects, and will process ideally that amount, right? The transfer encoding is more about breaking up a single request into multiple requests, right? So you're saying, and I think you do it. I think you do that by specifying it in hexadecimal format. So you're saying like, hey, this is what the value of this is now, and based off of content length, and the remaining value in the next request, use transfer encoding chunked. At least that's my understanding. Which is fine if you're sending it to the same server, right? If there's nothing sitting in between, like if I'm literally just running a web server on my machine and I'm sending requests to it, that's fine. That's going to work fine. There's no proxy on my machine that sits between the web server. There's no load balancer. There's nothing else. But this is pretty much what this is talking about, though, is when you have like providers like Akamai or something along those lines, when you've got a load balancer, when you've got reverse proxies, when you've got systems that sit in front of your web server, there's a disconnect, right? And that's kind of what they talk about. So I'm just trying to see which... So yeah, this is a good example, I guess. This one kind of I can talk through and use this diagram. So imagine blue and green are two different users. They're both sending a request. It hits some system that is the front end. We'll just say it's like Akamai. I don't know. We'll throw that out there. So you've essentially got two requests going through the same system. They're going to be routed to the back end. And how this works is it tries to prepend some basically it's combining two requests together, and the front end only recognizing the first request and the second request being forwarded onto the back end. And there's some interesting byproducts of doing something like that. Is there anything you want to say? I'm going to pause for a second, Seth. I don't know if there's any clarifications or anything you want to say.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing here is it's not just those large services like Akamai and others that are vulnerable to this, right? The more research that's being done, most of the apps that we roll out nowadays, we talk about like an N-tier architecture or a 3-tier architecture, where the web server, what the clients are interacting with is something like Nginx or is some sort of reverse proxy that makes these calls back to application servers behind the scenes, or web services or microservices or Kubernetes or whatever else, right? And so the reason this has become more of a thing is because we are using that front end, and they weren't set up properly in order to mitigate against this sort of an attack. So that's the only thing I wanted to mention, is it's not just those large sites that are vulnerable to this. It's actually a lot of smaller sites that are trying to do multiple things from a single domain where they run into issues.
Yeah, they talk about web cache deception here, and I think that's really, we've talked about this one before, where it's Oh my gosh, I can't remember the name of the actual technology, but there's a basically there's a way to cache requests and cache honestly the responses. So only like basically multiple people could be sending the same request, and this is for like a lot of times for static HTML content that maybe doesn't have any changes or has like one small piece that changes that's variable data. And so everything is cached. And if your request matches previous request, it'll just give the previously cached response for that exact type of request. So
yeah,
I think they do touch on that at the
it's cache poisoning, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
But so that's one. But I think this second diagram really illustrates it really well, right? It shows the attacker is effectively, they got their normal blue request, and then they've got their that orange portion is the nefarious arbitrary content, and it pollutes this. Up here we've got our two different people's requests, and here it's polluted. You can see the second user's response data. Now, what you might like. I was thinking about okay, what are the if you're really messing around with the response, right? Like that's a big part of the value here is actually getting the response that you want to be shown to someone else to be shown to them. But what is the value if you do that? Well, some of the examples they show are redirection, which I thought was very valid and very interesting. If I can find it. I think it's towards the very bottom here. I'm gonna have to scroll a lot. Sorry for those folks that have to put up with this scrolling I'm doing. Yeah, so for one, you can trick people into producing, you can provide different content. I'm sure you could fish or grab some data and have them. Basically, you could easily populate a form, have them fill it in, and send it to your server, right? That's one way. But another thing they show is kind of like redirection and some you know how I feel about cross-site scripting, but so they show some of that here where they're doing some of that. Yeah, they got the old alert that we talked about last week.
Print.
Now
that's what we're doing now. Yes.
Now it's gonna be print. But anyways, so here though they show actually you're leveraging that JavaScript being rendered in the page to perform an arbitrary redirection off to an attacker site. So that's actually pretty interesting. But one of the things that I think that I was curious about is to use this request smuggler tool, because in order to test for this vulnerability, say you're a bug bounty researcher and you want to test it on a site, but you don't want to actually impact other users, since that's typically explicitly laid out as a rule that you can't affect other users. That's why denial of service and anything that relies on you using. So if I have insecure direct object reference and I exploit that vulnerability on another one of my test accounts, fine. If I do it on a valid user and I pull down their data, and then I submit to a bounty program, not cool, right? Not cool at all. So the tool and the methodology that he kind of shows here, he walks through basically how to, without impacting other people, actually, test for that. So anyways, I just wanted to bring some awareness to this vulnerability, or this class of vulnerability, and this whole article. It's too much to talk about, and I think you should really read through it. But yeah, just some interesting, cool stuff, and something that I don't know, man. It was just interesting to me to sort of read through. And again,
it popped back up because of that new command line tool, right?
Right.
That was based on the research. So I'm wondering, right? That request smuggler, it looks like cargo install, so it's some sort of Rust implementation. Was there something new from that it was doing, or just a re-implementation of what James did? Okay.
Re-implementation in an automated way that isn't going to affect other people. Cool. So it's basically that's I think the value of it.
Yeah, I mean it looks fairly simple, but I don't know. Like I dig those small tools that you can use like that for simple tests rather than firing up all of Burp Suite at times, even just to replay and understand what's going on.
Right.
Because I know a lot of times, like we have a tendency as security people to load in all of the different Burp plugins, and then it's spitting out a whole bunch of data, and stuff like this gets kind of put by the wayside, or I'm not quite sure why it's working or what's going on, and so I may or may not include it. And yeah, so
right.
So check out that tool. Yeah.
And the specific way that he shows, and I was trying to pull that up, the specific way that he talks about here is causing a timeout on the back end. And the way that he does that is by basically having this short content link that says, hey, here are the two values in this post request. You can see here on the screen, I think. And then that queue, which is like, so because he's got the transfer encoding chunked directive. By the way, I should mention James, who wrote this, is actually coming on the podcast in September. Yeah. So that'll be a really fun one. I can't, honestly, I can't wait for that. So it's gonna be really fun. Anyways, back to it. So basically, because of the transfer encoding chunk directive, the application knows to wait for another request. And because no other request is sent and there is no other data, and there's just that, content that you see in front of you, the system will time out. And that's the way that, he tests to make sure that the vulnerability is there without actually affecting other users. I'm sure it's prone to some false positives for sure. I mean, I'd have to imagine, but still pretty cool stuff. Just wanted to raise some awareness back to this vulnerability. That's all.
Cool.
Yeah.
Good. Let's see. What else is on our list then? Right.
I don't think anything else was on our list. I think I might have thrown some things in there. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, Orange Sai released his web challenges, right? The stuff that he's written. He dropped it up on GitHub. And this is always here. I'll throw the links in there, right? All of these
Orange Sai is a badass. Just for anybody who's not familiar, seriously, really, really badass. Like, yeah.
Yep.
That's all I can say. Yeah, that's all I want. I mean, you could just type in, Orange Sai in GitHub, and you'll see why I'm saying that. But yeah, this Orange Sai has a long history of doing some really cool things.
Yep. And these are all of the CTFs that he's personally written for different events, which and it goes into stuff that we don't necessarily deal with all the time, right? As the code that I review is mostly web centric, right? So at times it doesn't go quite as deep as what he's looking into, right? But you want to learn how to do some of this stuff and actually push your brain. This is the way to do it, is to start with some of these CTF challenges and understand why it works. That's the hardest part is, okay, right, he's coded this up, and releasing that allows us to look at the code behind the scenes as to, all right, yeah, it's great to solve one of these CTF challenges, but understanding how it's implemented behind the scenes as a defender is invaluable as someone who's looking at code, because then you can train your AI to look for similar code snippets, right?
I feel like that was directed specifically at one person.
I don't know. There's only two of us on the podcast, so everything's directed at you. So
I guess that's true. Felt very targeted. That's all I'm saying. Awesome. Well, yeah, man. Actually, I'm good to kind of cut short today if you're amenable to it.
Yeah.
I don't think we have too much that we need to go through.
Nope. It's been a good discussion today. I know we've covered quite a few different things, but please feel free to speak up if you got any questions. But as always, please join the conversation. Jump into Slack or DMs. Ask Ken about AI. That was my takeaway from today.
Son of a bitch. You dick.
Sorry. I mean, don't ask Ken about the AI. Sorry, I just got confused there for a minute.
All right. Good times.
But jump into Slack, right? Like, let's continue the conversation. Let's talk about desync attacks. I mean, I'd like to see somebody using those. Let us know what your experiences with desync attacks are, or the request smuggling attacks. Because I have seen it pop up a few times. That was going to be my question to you before we end. Is if you're seeing those come through your bug bounty program, have you seen any request smuggling attacks?
Oh man, that's a great. I know.
Or
that
can
when
you
that
even talk about it? Yeah.
No, I can. Yeah, actually, there was web cache. Somebody had found. Yeah, somebody had. Let me actually pull up. Not now, obviously, but actually, that brings up a good. So let me finish that thought. Next time we do the podcast, actually, I'd like to run through some of our coolest. I'll throw that in there, and I think that there's some cool because we had like a blog that was Greg Osa, my boss, wrote a blog post that was really awesome that talked about 7 or 8 years of history of GitHub Bounty, and he put in a bunch of like cool bounty submissions that came through. I don't know, did I share it on the podcast or did I just put it on Twitter? I can't remember.
I don't think we actually talked about it. You might have dropped it in the chat one day, but I don't think we talked through what that was. So that would be a great one to reiterate. Okay. I could be forgetting though too. I mean, this is 142. So, but let's. I mean,
yeah, that's the thing. That's the problem with the long running podcast is that it gets hard to remember what all was talked about. People may not have realized, may or may not realize that. But like, anyways, I want to. Yeah, let's walk through that, and then I'll talk. Yeah, here it is. I found it. I'm going to post it, but we'll talk through it, and then I'll throw in some extra cool ones that were my favorites, and some web cache deception related stuff as well. So we need to talk about AI.
AI, yeah. Sweet. No, yeah. I don't think you've posted that one before, so let's talk about it, and we can run through that next week and maybe demo a couple of them. That would be interesting. I'll dig through it as well. But if you've got another topic, if anyone listening has another topic they want us to cover, please let us know.
Sweet.
Cool. All right.
But we're not on next week, so we do have to figure out when we're gonna do our. We'll put it in the Slack channel like when we're gonna do our next podcast episode.
Yeah, that's right. I'm actually taking vacation next week, so. I may not even have internet access where I'm at. We'll see.
That you shouldn't. Summer is a vacation time. So it is what it is.
Is what it is. Sweet. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining today. Thanks for interacting, and we'll see everybody online.
Later.